Take the journey with Mike and Mike as we commemorate Black History Month with the legends, visionary, pioneer, and inventor Carl Adams, and later this month with the amazing Kerry McCoy in 2-on-1 with Mike and Mike.
How many Atom machines are out there? I feel, look, Mike and I have been to hundreds, and you obviously hundreds and hundreds of wrestling rooms. And I really can't think of a time that, I mean, I feel like they're everywhere, right? I feel like every, whether I'm in Oskaloosa, Iowa, or California, or Pennsylvania, or Massachusetts.
I'm dreaming. I got up the next morning. Here's this piece of paper. And I looked at it and I went to work. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I wake up in the middle of the night. I scribble on a piece of paper because I kept thinking about this thing that you could drill with when no one's around. And having a pretty strong understanding of the benefits of drilling, somewhere along the way, and I think about this a lot now, because when I talk to kids at camps or anyone who I'm talking to about business, in my mind, the whole key is to finish what you start. Mm-hmm. A lot of people start stuff. A lot of people have great ideas, but they never finish.
We have a lot of Long Island listeners, and we have the Brentwood Indians, and Coach Napolitano. Maybe something real quick you wanted to say out to your fellow, brothers and sisters from Brentwood. I know that they're probably watching.
I'm so proud of the Brentwood wrestling community. How you guys have been so consistent and supportive of each other in that program. I can't remember too many years when Brentwood hasn't done pretty well. And even this last year, where I was actually at the New York State meet, they had a pretty good showing. So congratulations to you guys, and keep up the great work.
Welcome to another episode with 2-on-1 with Mike and Mike. I'm your host, Michael Vetrano, along with my partner in crime, Michael Torriero. Today's guest is the pride of Brentwood, New York, the pride of Ames, Iowa. He's been a national champion. He's a place in the Pan Am Games. That's Coach Carl Adams. How are you, Coach?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Mike. And Mike.
Good to see you, Coach.
Coach, you look great. You sound great, which, you always do. Coach, obviously you had an illustrious career, right? From Brentwood to Iowa State to the senior circuit. But I kind of want to go back in time and talk about how you first got involved in the sport. Brentwood in New York is a storied program. How did you gravitate to become a Brentwood Indian?
Well, my dad took me to a professional wrestling event when I was 7 years old. It was held at Madison Square Garden, and I saw some of the great professional wrestling names of that time, Bobo Brazil, Bruno Sammartino, the Calypso Kid, Haystacks Calhoun, on and on. So it was a great card. And so after that event, I was hooked. I was hooked. And then when I reached 7th grade, they had organized wrestling. That was my first year in junior high school. And so I went out for the team and had a great coach, and Coach Dick Green. And that's when I fell in love with the sport. So it was a really great fit. I'll put it that way.
Oh, it's a great fit. I mean, we're going to certainly get into it, but like we talked about, what a phenomenal program. And so, Coach, I have two questions, and obviously Mike had some. What were you a bit? And so, you're 12 or 13 years old or 14. Were you a big kid? Walk me through your physical stature.
Yeah, well, in I think 7th grade, I wrestled at 95, and by the time I hit 9th grade, I was at 118.
Wow. Okay.
whatever the weight class was at that time. But when I went to high school, I shot up. I shot up to 150 pounds. However, I wrestled 130 as a sophomore in high school. So I was cutting a good amount of weight to make that weight. But I really started growing when I hit high school. And the thing is, I played football in 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And because I thought I was going to be too small when I hit high school, I switched over to soccer. And as soon as I hit high school, I blew up. And I'm kind of glad I went out for soccer. I played that in 10th, 11th, and 12th because it was great for conditioning. I didn't have to worry as much about injuries, although I didn't even think about it at that time. That's in hindsight. So it worked out pretty good.
Coach, it certainly worked out. So, you now we're in 9th, 10th, 11th grade. When did you, I guess, tell us about the program? Obviously, I believe Coach Campos was the head coach. What was it like in that room? I mean, in terms of how many kids were there, typical practice, what really lit the fire? When did you kind of know, I'm Carl Adams and I've arrived and I'm going to be part of this program?
Well, we had kids feeding in from 3 different junior high schools. North Junior High, South Junior High, and what was the other one? West Junior High. And so they all had wrestling teams. So we had probably 30, 40 kids in the room. We had a JV and varsity team. But when I reached high school, and I think because we had Coach Campo, it was intense. He worked us really hard. He really knew his wrestling. He had a system from all 3 positions, things that we worked on pretty much every day. And I felt like he really worked on the mental part a lot. He didn't stand for guys moping around, sitting on the side, and he didn't feel sorry for you. And we knew that he wanted us to go to work. But he was a great coach. He was a great coach. He loved his wrestlers, and they had the highest amount of respect for him because how he treated them. And we knew as the athletes on the team that we had to work hard every single day. And if you weren't working hard, he would let you know about it.
Wrestling, a sport measured by technique, mental toughness, discipline, and persistence. But it also brings children with all skill levels interested in the sport in droves when there's great coaching. Team Purcell Training Center in Iowa is at the epicenter of great wrestling. Being one of the best youth clubs in the Midwest, the center has a deep understanding for community and wellness. At the top of their game, they may be in Iowa, but they have nationwide appeal and a national model for success. Run by U.S. Veterans National Champion Anthony Purcell, Purcell's vision and mission of the center is to build children from the ground up with their wellness in mind. To Purcell, it doesn't matter if the children are novice wrestlers or state champions. His goal is to build character, create a positive, nurturing, and spirited environment, and to produce respectful ambassadors in his community. The training center benefits people from all ages, ranging from the average fitness workout to mixed martial arts, specialized youth training, and self-defense. Purcell Training Center, where excellence is the standard.
You were awfully successful in high school. I think that the folklore is that you never lost a dual meet, probably. What was the process like when you started to realize that wrestling was a vehicle for you to get out of the South Shore of Long Island, and that it was a flat world that it could take you anywhere? And what was that recruiting process like with, what schools were you looking at? How come you chose Iowa State? Talk us through a little bit of that.
Well, to be honest, until I got to my senior year, I really wasn't thinking all that much about college. Now, my older brother, Eddie, who was 2 years ahead of me. He went to Farmingdale Junior College. And he won the Junior College Nationals as a freshman at Farmingdale.
Mm.
And so that kind of got me interested in this college thing. And so over the summer of my junior year, Coach Campo was taking wrestlers around to these various tournaments. We were competing. I really didn't know what was going on. I would just jump in the car with the guys. We would go wrestle, and I would win. And I kept winning. And
Did a lot of winning,
in
Coach.
one of the tournaments,
Yeah.
it was the final qualifier for a group that would go to the Great Lakes training camp in Chicago. And this training camp was all about making a national team, or what they called at that time a junior Olympic team. And if you made the junior Olympic team, you're off to Germany. And so that was the first time I flew on a plane. It was going from New York to Chicago to that training camp. The training camp lasted 2 weeks. But during the training camp, they had a tryout. You know, we had a tournament to see who would make the team. So I made the team. I was first in Greco and second in freestyle on the national ladder. And so I was one of the guys that traveled to Europe. And for me, that was a great experience. And I think it was also a place that helped me make one of my biggest jumps, because we were at this training camp, training with the best kids in the country, some of the best coaches. And that's also where the coaches from Iowa State, I would say Les Anderson in particular, noticed me. And I found out later on, because he told me that he had actually spoke to me, but I didn't remember that. I didn't know who he was. You know, you speak to a guy and you move on. And so they followed up my senior year at Brentwood, and they recruited me pretty heavily. And so I went on my recruiting trip, met my roommate to be, Phil Parker. We both decided that we were going to Iowa State. So they offered a full scholarship, and I was off to Iowa State. It was pretty much as simple as that. Now I got calls from Oklahoma State, Michigan State, Bloomsburg, schools like that. And after I took the trip to Iowa State, met Coach Nichols, met some of the guys in the program, that was it. You know, I wasn't one of these kids that was comparing schools. Just give me a place to go to school and wrestle. I didn't even know that much about Iowa State when I was on a recruiting trip. I had heard that they were pretty good, but as it turned out, I ended up in the best possible place I could have ended up. You know?
Well, it sounds like you never had a rainy day, in that you always seem like you're very, very composed. Was there ever any point in your youth, high school, international career, business life, being at Boston University, where you felt overwhelmed, or has it always just been that attitude that your father instilled of you deserve it because you worked hard, and you know that's just what it is? Were you ever overwhelmed or thought, man, what am I doing here? I don't suspect that you have. To be clear,
I don't know if you would call it overwhelmed, but one of the toughest times in my life was when they dropped the program at Boston University, because it came out of nowhere. And it was on April Fool's Day. And so it was devastating for the wrestlers in the program. It was devastating for me. And then the aftermath with people from all over the country writing letters, calling, sending money, everything you could imagine. Alumni setting up meetings with the vice president, the president, the athletic director, That was a tough time, but you know, it was kind of like I was more concerned for the kids in the program than I was for myself. I felt like I'm going to land on my feet. That's just how I roll. But for the kids in a program, when a program is dropped, it's devastating. You know, it's devastating. And we had a really close program, a close group of kids. Now, for example, when they dropped the program, we had a whole nother year left. So we didn't have a recruiting year. And so 26 kids came out for the team. Mm-hmm. At the end of the season, we had 26 kids still on the team.
Well, that speaks volumes, certainly, yeah.
60% of these kids were walk-ons. So that shows you how close they were. And then that year, we went from the CAA into the EIWA, which was the largest Division I conference in the country. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's a tough conference, you know, Army, Navy, Lehigh, all the IBs. And this is something that I'm really proud of. My group of kids at the EIWA tournament, the referees vote on who they think were the sportsmen of the year. Okay, my guys won that trophy. And for some strange reason, I ended up being coach of the year. And so
that's fantastic, coach.
The athletic director, who was trying to downplay the program, that's something that he had to deal with the board of trustees. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you said these guys were so-so.
Yeah.
You know, he had put some stuff out there that, in my opinion, just wasn't true.
Agreed.
You want the best of high school wrestling? Long Island Wrestling Association's website brings you the best. Wrestling is one of the toughest blue-collar sports. The sport has tens of thousands of followers, and at the center of it all is the Long Island Wrestling Association, measuring the gravity of the sport. In 2002, National Hall of Fame wrestling inductee Steve Meehan created the #1 source for wrestling news in New York State. With contributors like Long Island Sports Hall of Fame inductee and historian Andy Slauson, the site is the most comprehensive wrestling website in the country for high school wrestling news. With in-depth analysis, entertaining facts, forums, and trending topics, this site has a treasure trove of historic high school wrestling information, with records dating back to the 1930s. There is no better source for high school wrestling coverage. Long Island Wrestling Association, keeping the wrestling world up to speed.
Coach, I could talk, you know, for hours about wrestling, but I just want to, I want to go back to your childhood, right? So you grew up in Brentwood. You keep talking about, you know, being resilient and all the things that you accomplished. What did you draw on from your childhood in terms of work ethic or the way, you know, way you were brought up and raised? Tell us a little bit about your childhood, because I believe that probably translates into your wrestling.
Yeah, well, we were brought up tough. When I say tough, we started working at a very young age. My dad used to transport migrant workers from Florida to Long Island to pick potatoes. In fact, we were a family of migrant farmers. When I first moved to Long Island, you know, with my family, mom, dad, and siblings, we lived in a 3-room house, no bathroom and no running water. And by the time I hit 2nd grade, we moved into a much bigger house. And so as we were growing up, by the time we hit 11, 12, 13 years old, my brothers, 2 brothers and I, we were working like full-grown men. Now, we had a great childhood as far as friends, as much we played, when we had time to play, we're involved in sports, but man, we worked. And we did tough work. We did work that grown men would do. In fact, wrestling was actually, and I shouldn't say this, it was actually easy for me. And I say that in comparison to the work that we had that we were doing growing up. And for me, wrestling was so much fun. And it's funny because Mike Campo, Coach Campo's son, and my brother Ron, they used to get mad at me because they used to say, "Carl, why you work so hard? Your dad's gonna get mad at us," because I guess I was working a lot harder than they were and everybody else was. But wrestling came naturally to me. I loved it. I gravitated towards it. It just fit me. It was just a thing where the mental part and the physical part just came together. And nobody ever told me. But when I look back, and again, this is not even to pat myself on the back either. I was a full-grown man by that time. I had my junior year in high school.
That's why I was asking about your size. I always kind of wondered that. Yeah, how you grew. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, by the time I hit especially my senior year, I was very strong. I never really lifted weights. I never really lifted weights in college. And a lot of people ask, "Wow, what type of lifting did you do?" I didn't do any lifting. Now, I'm going to tell you what made me strong. My dad, over the years, developed these various businesses. And we used to go to New York City when they were having that urban development, and they were tearing down the big buildings with the red brick. And we used to go to the city. We used to, when the bricks hit the ground, we used to clean them with an L-shaped piece of iron. And we literally used to load bricks, whole dump trucks. We would do that all day long.
Well, I wonder why that was some workout. Yeah.
Wrestling, in comparison to that, wasn't too bad at all. But the big thing, about wrestling was that I loved to wrestle. I just loved the technique, loved the strategies, loved controlling someone physically through the sport. And so those are my thoughts on the sport. And I felt the same way all through college and after, because I used to stay after at times, especially in the off season when we had freestyle, and I was just into working technique. And I gravitated towards people like Bobby Douglas because he was such a great technician. Les Anderson, the assistant coach at Iowa State, he was very good as well. And I was around guys like Gable Peterson, Jason Smith, and you watch these guys and you wrestle with them. They'll let you know exactly where you were. So you had a gauge every single day. This guy won a national championship, like Jason Smith, the two-time national champ, three-time All-American. Ben Peterson, Dan Gable, Dave Martin. These are all national champions. So you were able to gauge every single day. And the bottom line is, you didn't want to lose. You knew where you had to go. And if you made that team, there was a good chance that you were going to be, at a minimum, an All-American and most likely a national champion. And that's the way we all thought. That was the thought process at Iowa State at the time. And the fruit bears it out You know,
For
we
sure.
won 3 national titles and 1 second in my 4 years. That wasn't because of me. That was because of the people that we had in that room.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it was, you know, an illustrious career. Have you started to write the memoir yet, Coach? And if so, what is the title?
Well, I actually wrote a book when they dropped the program at VU.
Okay.
They gave me a 2-year contract. And it was a crazy situation. It was kind of like I was the athletic, one of the athletic advisors for the student athletes. But I really didn't do that much with it. And so I said, I'm going to write a book. So I wrote this book called Think It, Believe It, Do It.
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, I chronicled my life growing up, my parents, my family, and I went step by step through all of the businesses I started, how the Atom takedown machine came about, the snap and shoot, camps. You know, I ran camps for 34 consecutive years during the time I was at Rhode Island and Boston University. And so I wanted to give people a picture of how this stuff was done, because I thought it was unique.
I think we all think
You
it's
know?
unique.
Yeah, for sure. So talk about unique. And real quick, you coach Buxton, right? Was he one of your guys at
Yes,
URA,
yeah,
correct?
yeah.
The old Blair coach, one of the most successful
Yeah.
head coaches. So you talk about unique, right? You know, in your room, you had obviously Coach Dan Gable. You had, I think, both Petersons, or the Peterson brothers, right? The both of them.
Well, actually, Ben and I came in at the exact same time.
Okay, all right.
And later on, his younger brother Dan came in, but
Okay.
John Peterson, the older brother, he
Okay.
went to a Division II school.
Okay.
I think South State.
Okay. So
But he wasn't at Iowa State though.
okay.
We
Obviously,
trained with him. He
Yeah.
came, trained with Ben, and you know, I can remember being at camps and it would be me, John, and Ben going round.
that's
You know, we're
all
training for the
Olympic
76
medalists.
Olympic,
Yeah,
team, and
that's some crew.
I used to wrestle Ben a lot. You know, we were pretty good friends. We're still good friends. In fact, he does Bible studies with my son now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Coach, talk about unique. You had a pretty unique heavyweight on your team. One of your teammates was Chris Taylor, right? So
Yeah.
this is something we talked about off the air. At that time, there wasn't a weight limit, right, for super heavyweight, right? And there's definitely folklore of, may he rest in peace, obviously, of Chris, you know, being north of 400 pounds. I kind of want to get your take on, looking back, did you feel that there should be a weight limit, or do you feel like that there shouldn't be, right? So, you know, first off, tell us a little bit about Chris, because he's kind of a legend in terms of his size and stature. And then what are your thoughts on the weight class?
Well, Chris was a gentle giant, but although he was big, he was athletic. He was extremely strong, extremely strong. You know, he transferred from junior college. He won 2 national titles at Iowa State, never lost a bet. Made the Olympic team in '72. That was his junior year at Iowa State. He won a bronze in freestyle, and you know, he got beaten in Greco. But Chris was probably 429 pounds. You know, definitely north of 400. Regarding his size in the weight class, I think there should be a limit. However, I also feel that perhaps they should have another weight, super heavyweight, perhaps somewhere in the 350 range for the really big guys that can't make 285. And I think that would be one way to handle that.
We never saw Taylor.
I'm sorry.
I didn't want to interrupt, Mike. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. So Coach, you know, you've been around the sport forever. You've not only been around it and succeeded on it, you know, but you've innovated it in numerous ways. What is it that you see right now, retired, being a spectator, not really being involved as you once were? What are you looking forward to seeing wrestling growing into, or excited about, or think changes that should be made for the sport for the better? What's your objective opinion, as a spectator for the first time in your life?
Well, as a spectator, I look a lot at the technical aspect of the sport. And I look at what's happening with all of the scrambling now. Okay. Mm-hmm. And wrestling is a sport that changes and stays the same. You'll see a sweep single 25 years ago, then it goes away. And then 15 years later, people are coming back, different setup, still sweep single. You'll see inside steps. You'll see a knee dip, high crotch. I remember your inside step, by the way, Mike. That was, yeah, I remember that.
It was pretty. It was pretty. Wasn't it?
You had a very good inside step. But anyway, it changes and stays the same. But I don't like to see guys doing as much scrambling as they do now, because a lot of them, I'm going to say a good number of them, end up getting injured because you compromise your joints. And I've always felt that a good, basic, solid wrestler, there's a great penetration step. There's a very quick sprawl and doesn't allow his opponent to get to his legs. And a couple solid shots, perhaps from each side, can get off the mat. I believe that you're going to do just about as good as you can do if you master those aspects of the sport.
Coach Billy, we have a clip that I wanted to show you and break down here. Billy, if you could bring that up. I wanted you to kind of walk us through this move.
Can you see it?
I can see. Yeah, I can see it.
So here we are against Jones, right? I think it's going to roll here. When you get onto your feet here in about a second, looks like you go righty club and then to a snap down, right? So it was kind of like you talk about your side step. So you went righty club and you also kind of shucked them by, right? So to me, that, and I've watched a lot of wrestling, that move, right, kind of that throw by and that chuck by, was that really as prevalent then as it is now? That looked pretty innovative. Kind of what we kind of do now. I'm sure you remember the match.
Did you boot that foot out, and did you kick his foot out with the inside of your?
I saw that footwork. Yep.
Let me tell you a little bit about it before you get too deep. Yep. And give me too much credit on that.
All right.
I had never done that before.
Okay.
And basically, that was spur of the moment and just the intensity of being in the finals. And he was coming in trying to rough me up. And I was on the outside. And I said, all right, I'm going to hit you in the back of the head. And I hit him.
A nice righty club there. Yeah, for sure.
I hit him as hard as I could. I had never done that before. But when he hit the mat, he was almost knocked out.
Yeah, it looked like it for sure.
But I mean, I was on the outside and I just, boom. Now, I had never seen that before someone sent me that film. I didn't even realize I had done it until I saw that film probably 15 years after that tournament. My college roommate sent me that film because he got it from somewhere. I'm glad he sent it because I like watching it. But
yeah, we figured you'd like that, enjoy that. I mean,
that was not planned, and it wasn't something I worked on in the room. That was one of those things where it's just really intense. It's really physical, and I'm gonna beat you up. That's what that was.
So, Coach, what is it? I have two questions, and I'm gonna roll it into one. But I guess something that I've been asking everybody is what you can answer this last, but what's the best piece of advice you've given? What's the best piece of advice that you give? And then also, now that you've retired, you still got a lot of fire in the belly, a lot of energy, a lot of strength. You're not just going to go and buy, green bananas and hang around and wait to meet your maker. What do you have planned in this, next chapter of your life that's away from wrestling? What can we expect from Coach Adams?
Well, the bottom line is, I think it's so important to find your passion. When you find your passion, man, it seems like you can float through life a lot easier. And if you're really good at your passion, you can make a living at it. Now, I've been fortunate, knock on wood, to make a living at the sport of wrestling. And I'll be the first to tell you that wrestling defines me. Not everything about me, but a lot of what I've done throughout my life involves the sport of wrestling. And so I'm passionate about it. Now, as far as the next things that I'm doing, I love what I'm doing in retirement. I'm working on developing equipment. I have all my own tools. I have 45 years of knowledge. We're working on a football dummy now. My son and I are putting together mixed martial arts training devices. Even on my website, I have probably 7 different designs that I did. And generally, when you design something, it's rare that it actually gets to the market and people actually buy it. But everything on my website has been bought. And so I'm excited about that. I feel totally blessed. I don't know how it happened. But when I come up with a concept and I really believe in the concept, I'm going to finish it. It may not work when I get to the end, but I'm going to finish it. And I always say, finish what you start.
Coach, before we let you go, we talk about finish what you start. I have to ask you this question, right? Really quick, going back to Iowa State. I believe you came in when Coach Dan Gable, when he was a senior, you were a junior, correct? Right? Oh, no, I'm sorry, you were a sophomore.
He was a senior, I was a sophomore.
Right, you were a sophomore. So you were there, right, when the famous match when he wrestled Larry Owings, I believe, from Washington in the finals. And unfortunately, I'm a Dan Gable fan, so I'm going to say unfortunately lost, right? As your teammate, as someone who's there, tell us a quick little narrative on, from your perspective, what really happened, and kind of what happened right after the loss.
Well, first of all, none of his teammates thought that the match was going to be close. None of us thought that Larry Owings would ever beat him. In fact, we couldn't wait until the match got going because Larry Owings, he cut from 150 to 142, and he had put it out there that he was going down to beat Dan Gable. So Dan is going up one side of the bracket, pinning everyone. Larry Owings is going up the other side of the bracket, pinning everyone. So these two guys end up in the finals. And probably 95% of the people, maybe more in the stands, felt like Dan was going to win his 3rd title. Well, he lost. Okay, and Larry Owings won the match. There's no excuses. He won. However, for me, one of the biggest lessons that came out of that is that on a given day, anyone could be beat. Because I had so much respect for Dan because, I wrestled him in the room. And I know how tough he was.
How'd that go, Coach, at that time?
you know what? He could beat me. but here's the truth of that story. I could go with literally anyone in that room. I'm talking about Ben, Jason, Chuck Jean, all of them. It didn't matter. Dan was the only guy in that room that I hated to wrestle. And that was for one reason. You knew he was going to get you tired. And that no matter how good a shape you were in, he was going to end up embarrassing you because you were so tired, you couldn't defend yourself. And so my respect for him comes from having wrestled him over a number of years. I mean, we worked out when he was training for the 72 Olympics. He was one of the world team coaches when I made the world team in 1975. And, you know, I wrestled Chalice in the final bout.
Wade Chalice, right? Yep.
Yeah, Wade Chalice. And so I made the team. Dan was one of the coaches. And I'm like, oh, crap. You know, we're going to tangle. One of these days. And Dan he's 2 years older than me. But sure enough, we hooked up in practice, and he still got the best of me. And so I find myself comparing him and Cael Sanderson a lot.
Yeah. And
I have unbelievable respect for Cael Sanderson as well. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how that match would have went because they're just, both of them are off the charts, you know. But Dan was one really tough dude. And he's tougher than a lot of people even know. You know, or at least he was.
What do you mean by that? Obviously, look, we're all wrestling guys. We're well read. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I'm going to give you from my perspective. I was a weight class, sometimes 2 weight classes above him, because the weight classes changed during our sophomore, maybe junior year. And he would get the best of me. You know, now the first time I wrestled him, I don't know if he remembers this, I do. Dan had come from the Olympic training camp, I guess. So he was in the room late my freshman year. And when he came in, we were already like maybe 2 or 3 weeks into practice. And he came to me and he said, hey, you want to go? And I said, sure. And we went at it. And I actually got the first couple takedowns. I hit him with speed and I was able to get him. Now, the thing is, there were times when I could really go, when I was coming in feeling good, strong, but he was gonna get you tired. He was gonna get you tired. And that was the thing about him, that just about everyone he wrestled, they had maybe 2 good periods. That's if they were really good. That third period, he had put so much pressure on you that you couldn't respond. You know, and I think a lot of people, when they look at him, they look at his record and say, wow, what an incredible record. But Dan was going 100% all the time in his matches and in practice. He wrestled the same way in practice that he did in his matches. And so that's why his conditioning was so good. In addition to that, he was training after practice. He was running across campus to classes. You name it, he was doing it. And when I look at that in hindsight, I wasn't going to try to be that. You know, I worked my butt off. I love the sport. But I also said, there's a limit.
Well, I was going to say, Coach, you did more than good stuff. You did great stuff. Again, we've talked about this off the air, but you really are a living legend in Brentwood. You know, people in Long Island, in the United States. I mean, people say it's, you know, an honor to talk to someone. It really is an honor to talk to them. Getting goosebumps here, just talking, you know, listening about your childhood and Iowa State and all the different stories. I can't thank you enough for being on our show. And, you know, obviously we'd like to talk to you again, but we wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much, Coach.
And thank you guys, and good luck to you.
Thanks, Coach Adams.